All right.
All right, so we are recording. So welcome to week 2 of Tech Labs. I know we threw a lot at you last week, and I promise we will talk about that before we move into this week's topic, which is browsers. So let me go ahead and start in immediately on software and hardware, what you guys did last week. For those of you who remember how to raise your hand, how many of you finished the module? You raise your hand. Oh, there's a few. Okay.
Actually, I think pretty much nearly everybody. If I could,
Everybody got it done? Okay. I
yeah,
have been out of town, so
yeah.
okay. Well,
There
that's
might have
good.
been a couple that snuck through, but it seemed like everybody who at least attempted the quiz finished it up at some point.
Excellent. So, Dan, if you wanted to do a quick review, or just kind of talk about things that you saw in the quiz that maybe
Yeah,
you wanted to talk about.
sure. I think a lot of the questions that were missed, if we throw out just poorly written questions, which I think there's some that were a little confusing. I even tried to fix a couple of them after I got some feedback. There's definitely a lot of confusion about ebooks, and I think a lot of that comes from some of you deal with Overdrive a lot, some of you are new to libraries, some of you deal with the state library resources. Um, I think though, because that is an important part of our job, the more you can do to be, you know, comfortable with all these different types of platforms. Some of them have benefits over the other ones. Just to kind of get experience with those is helpful. It seems like that was where people tended to miss the most when we started talking about Adobe Digital Editions or 3M Cloud Library. There was definitely some confusion there. Overall, though, I feel like everybody did a really good job on that quiz. I assume that some people took a lot longer to finish it, which is fine. I was telling people at our staff meeting today that I think there's a lot of skills being passed on or learned about using forums and knowing when to reach out for help. Things like knowing when you should search for Google. So you might not even realize how much tech skills you were displaying by finishing that quiz, but I think everybody did a really good job. There wasn't anybody that I would have said did poorly by any means. I think there was a couple people that didn't like their scores, and it could have just left it where it was, that they decided to retake it, and they feel a lot better about it, because I know that one person went from an average score to made sure that they had 100% before the week was done. So everybody did a great job. I know there's some people that are kind of bogged down about they're retaining some of these acronyms. I really wouldn't stress it too much. A lot of the reason we're throwing this at you is that so that when you see it again in the future, you just kind of recognize that that's something that you've been familiar with in the past. And really, it's all about knowing to find that information when you need it. Everything these days, when we talk about technology training in general, is there's just too much information out there to teach everybody on everything. And so what we really need to do is teach people how to be really good at finding information. So I think everybody kind of displayed a really good start on that. That's pretty much all I have. I was
Okay.
really impressed that people were using the forum. I would say make sure that you continue to use that type of thing and reach out with email any way you feel comfortable.
Okay. Awesome. So we've got Dan's thoughts on the content and how you guys did. Does anybody want to talk about any issues that they ran into, things that they found interesting or crazy making? Welcome to type it into the chat box or unmute yourself and speak up if you'd like. No, y'all just decided the content was perfect. Awesome. All right. Well, we will continue on. Like I said, I have not had a chance to go back and read through all of the forum posts, so there may be stuff there that that you guys have posted, and I'm not aware of because I just got back into town. this week. So, so if your thoughts on the content, everybody seems to be happy with it. How about the platforms that we're using? What we're connecting with today is the Zoom webinar software, and that's provided by the state of Kansas library. So it's the state library is managing that, and then every system gets 1 or 2 meeting rooms. And that's what we're using for this face-to-face section, part of the module. And then the rest of the class is done through Moodle, which is a content management system and learning management system. So it's both a CMS and an LMS. More acronyms is just what you guys wanted. But basically what Moodle does is it gives you a chance to put all of your class materials into one spot and let people access them. It makes it really easy for us to create quizzes and forums and that kind of thing. So how are you guys doing with Moodle? Everybody, I'm assuming, is logged in and has taken the quiz and done all that. So you've had a little bit of experience. Any thoughts on the Moodle platform?
I don't see anybody typing in the chat, so.
Nope. Okay. All right. Well, then, are there any questions before we go on to this week's topic, which is browsers?
Travis does say all good, just so you know. So.
Okay. It seems to be working. Helen asked if after the class is concluded, will there be a way to save the glossary? We were just talking about that in the staff meeting. We're leaning towards after the class is concluded, we'll just leave it up and invite people to come and do it as a self-paced learning experience. So instead of having the weekly meetings, they'll just log in and go through it at their own pace. So in that way, yes, the glossary will be available for you. All you'll have to do is log in and you'll be able to access it. Does that answer your question, Helen? Yes, thank you. All right, so sounds like everybody's happy. So we'll continue on to what we kind of wanted to go through with the browser. And our goals for this module were to help you identify all the parts of a browser and kind of be able to figure out what a correct URL is. And something that I think is a really valuable skill is not only identifying a correct URL, but fixing one that's wrong. Sometimes you can do that just by realizing that it's missing a .com or whatever. So that's something that we wanted you guys to be able to do. And then we also wanted you to be familiar with configuration of browsers for both staff and patron use. So we'll talk a little bit about the kinds of configurations that you can do with your various browsers. And then we're going to talk a little bit about forms and how to fill them out and the different tips and tricks that will help you fill out forms quicker and more efficiently. So that's kind of with this read-write web where we're not just consuming the information, we're also sending information back. Being able to access and navigate through forms properly is really important. And then finally, given a search bar in a browser, a learner will be able to identify, use, and manipulate that bar. Basically, you'll be able to use your search bar, figure out which search engine you want to use, and be able to get that bar working for you, essentially. So with that in mind, the browser is a piece of software that is on your computer. If you have a Windows machine, which I think most of us do, your default browser is Internet Explorer. If you have a Mac, your default browser is the Safari browser. The Internet Explorer browser's #1 use is going and downloading other browsers. Most people use their Internet Explorer browser to go out and get either Firefox or Chrome or Opera or one of the many browsers that are out there, and then rarely use it again. There are people who use it, but on a regular basis, but it seems like most tech folks you run into are going to go somewhere else and use something else. What we're using here in Neckles is Firefox generally. We recommend Firefox. And then to connect to the Koha browser, or the Koha in ILS through the browser, that is you've got to have a browser to do it, and we use a portable Firefox browser. And a lot of you will recognize that kind of a green overlay on your browser. That's the portable one, and the reason we do that is because we can set a printer to default from that browser, which would be a receipt printer. If we just used a single Firefox browser for Koha and everything else, you would have to switch printers. If you wanted to print something off full page, you'd have to switch to your full page printer, and if you wanted to check somebody out, you'd have to switch to the receipt printer, and remembering that is kind of a pain. So that's why Dan has set up the portable Firefox browser for Koha. So if you ever have any questions about that, that's what that's for. Just about everything we do these days is browser capable. So, we still have Microsoft Office and that on our computers, but if you don't want to use Microsoft Office and you don't want to pay the big bucks for Microsoft, we can certainly, you can use Google Drive to make Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, and PowerPoint presentations in your browser, through your browser. So even if there are still legacy software applications that you can purchase and put on your computer, there's almost always a browser-based option. And that's why Chromebooks and that kind of thing that just have browsers and no applications are so useful. Okay, so this is a standard Firefox browser from not too long ago. I hope it hasn't changed too much. But this is the kind of your options that you have for your browser. And starting with the left, that's the back button. And I think most of us are familiar with, you press that and it goes back. But did you guys know that if you press and hold the back button, the last 9 or so websites that you have visited will pop up? So that way, if you want to go back 3 or 4 sites, instead of hitting back 3 or 4 times, you can hit it once, hold it, wait for that drop down, and then go down to the site you want to go to. So that's kind of a little quick tip for the back button. The address bar is where you put the URL, and again, throwing those acronyms at you. URL stands for a Universal Resource Locator, and that is basically a text representation of the website you want to access. In a little bit, when we get into troubleshooting, I'll talk about the DNS system and how domain names sometimes fail, and the way that works is your domain name translates through the DNS system to a numerical IP address that identifies the computer that is holding the information you want to go to. Remembering 4 sets of 3 numbers each, or 2 or 3 numbers each, is difficult for humans, so that's why we have google.com instead of 111.236.58.100. So those are, I just made that up. I have no idea where that is. But I'm pretty sure actually 236 is legal. Anyway, so that's where you'll put your domain name into the address bar. And most modern browsers do not require that www. You'll see in my picture it's kind of grayed out. That's because I just typed in google.com and the browser just knew it was www. There are some times when you will go to a site that has a subdomain, and actually our Moodle site is on a subdomain. So you type in class.neckles.org. That you do have to enter the class in for the subdomain. But if you mean just the www, the standard website for Neckles, for example, is www.neckles.org. You do not have to enter the www. I mentioned some tricks with the URLs. A lot of times, .com is the most common, and that is commercial sites. But if you're looking to go to a school, especially a university for your higher education, you'll probably end up with a .edu, and those are only available to accredited educational institutions. So if you're looking for KU's website, chances are it's going to be ku.edu. Pretty sure it is, actually. So that is one way to determine how to get to that kind of thing. The rest of them are not very tightly managed. Like .org is for nonprofit organizations, but you do not have to prove that you're a nonprofit to get a .org address. You can just buy it. It costs the same amount as a .com address. So the same with .net. That's kind of intended for technical or network kind of resources, but you don't have to prove that you are a network of any kind to get the .net. Some of the other options, more recent, .info is a common one that you'll see, and that's a new one. It's one of the new four-letter longer extensions. But that, knowing kind of what the extensions are and how you can access them and how you can, fix things. So if you see a link to ku.com, you're pretty sure that's not correct. You want to actually go to ku.edu. There are also two-letter extensions, and those are state and country. So here in Kansas, you may be familiar with a lot of the USD, the elementary school addresses are .ks.us, and that is specifically for the Kansas state in the United States. Those are not available except through the state. So in that case, you can be pretty sure that it's an official organization at that point. But the oh, I didn't intend to do that. Sorry. But the other two-letter word there, the .us, there are .nz for New Zealand, .ca for Canada, .uk for the United Kingdom. A lot of times that will help you figure out scams. Like if you get a letter from an email from the IRS saying you have to download this new form, please go to irs.de. That's sending you to a server in Germany. DE is the German country code. And so that right there is a pretty good indication that you're not actually dealing with the actual IRS. And I've actually saved someone from getting probably horribly compromised by noticing that. So those are just some little URL tricks for you. The next is the search bar, and that's where you will type in your search query so that you can search directly from your browser. Of course, you can always just go to google.com or yahoo.com or any of the other Bing. That's the other one that I was checking, the big three, and do your search. But if you just want to do a quick search, you can use that. I'm finding that being less and less useful because in Chrome and Firefox, at least, you can actually do a search from the URL bar, the address bar itself. So if you type in a two-word search query, it will actually do the search for you. In Chrome, it's from Google. It just does a Google search automatically. So it's handy to know, but I'm not sure it's going to be around, how much longer it's going to be around. The next item that I have a little arrow going to is that star, and that's how you can create bookmarks for your computer so you can save web addresses so that you do not have to keep them all in your head. That is a handy thing, and it can be shared among computers if you all sign in with the same username and password for syncing up between browsers in Firefox or Chrome. But generally they're computer dependent, and that's a good way to save your locations that you need to go to frequently. The next little arrow is going to an add-on icon, and I would also like to point out that the little wrench and the list, those are also add-on icons. They're add-ons that I have on my browser. This is the wrench is a Firefox developer, web developer plugin that lets me see some information about the structure of the website so that I can do some debugging when I'm working with websites. I meant to check this. I'm not really sure what this middle one is. The list, it's probably a Remember the Milk or some kind of application like that. And then Pocket helps you save articles to read later. So I can save an article on my browser and then pull up my Pocket app on my phone and read it. So those are add-ons or extensions. Both Firefox and Chrome have very robust extension environments and stores. They're free generally, but they do have kind of a store-like interface. But honestly, when I need an extension, generally I will either find out about it through reading something on the internet and they'll have a link to the extension, or I can just do a quick Google search for Chrome extension and then whatever feature or function I want to happen. And just like your Apple iPhone, if you can think of it, there's probably an extension for it. So those extensions are ways to extend the functionality of your browser in different ways. The next little icon is a down arrow. That's where your downloads live. A lot of times you will click on an item and ask it to download to your computer, and then if you're like me and you do a lot of downloading, it's lost in your downloads folder. Well, if you click that little arrow, it'll turn green when there's something there. You click that little arrow, you can directly click on whatever it is you've downloaded. You don't have to go searching for it in your download folder. So that's kind of a handy trick as well. The next button is a home button, and that takes you back to the original start tabs for your browsing experience. So if you get completely lost or just want to go back home to your familiar areas, you can click on the home button and that will pull up your home tabs. The next, the little smiley face is also another add-on, and that's a co-browsing add-on so that I can browse a website with a friend. Finally, the little menu bar here is the option menu. It's also called the configuration menu. That's where you're going to set your home tabs, your home buttons, the home tabs that you get to from your home button. I usually have 6 or 7 websites that I like to have as my home. And that means whenever I open my browser, those websites automatically load into my browser. And whenever I hit home, those are the 6 websites that I go back to. So you set that through the option menu. You can also set the download location. It's going to default to my downloads, but you can change that. And you can kind of mess around with your extensions, turn them off and on and that kind of thing through the option menu as well. In the Moodle class, there's a whole bunch of, I go through the configurations step by step on both the Chrome and the Firefox browsers. So you can certainly take a look at those and see a little bit more about that. This is kind of simplistic for a lot of you, but I thought because forms are so important, especially in Koha, that's basically what we do with Koha is we fill out forms all day, though it doesn't, it not always seems like that, but every time we create a patron, every time we check out a book, every time we run a report, we are in some way, shape, or form filling out a form. So the very first section here, the first form picture is I have a bike, I have a car. Those are check boxes, and those are multiple choice, which means I can check both of them, and both will be valid. So you'll see those occasionally. This drop-down menu, usually you can only check one, but sometimes 2, maybe half the time, you can actually select more than one here. And to do that, there's a couple of different ways to do that. You can click on HTML and then holding down your Shift key on your keyboard, click on JavaScript. That will select HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Or you can click on HTML, hold down your control key, and click on JavaScript. That will skip the CSS and just select HTML and JavaScript. So there's a little trick for selecting more than one thing in a dropdown. Not all of them allow it. It has to be allowed, but if necessary, that's a good way to do that. A lot of people get confused there. The next item is your basic text box. I don't have a whole lot of tips for that other than you can, if you're like me and hate taking your hand off the mouse all the time, you can type in your first name, hit the tab, and type in your last name. You don't have to take your hand off the mouse and click into each one. You can use the tab key to navigate from one text box to the next, or from one checkbox group, or in the case of the last bunch of things there, radio button group. And radio buttons are very similar to checkboxes, except there's one choice allowed. So you can either be male or female or other, but you can't be all three or even any two of them. So that is kind of a quick tips on how to do forms, simply because so much of what we do these days on the web requires us to provide information, and almost everything we do in Koha does. So that's definitely something you want to look at. Finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about troubleshooting. For browsers, troubleshooting essentially equals Googling it, quite frankly. Google is your friend if your browser is not working properly. There are a couple of different kinds of messages you'll get when you're having problems with the browser, in the browser. The first type is server messages, and those sometimes you'll see 404 pages, or occasionally you'll see a 500 server error message. Those are not really things you can affect. That's a problem on the other end of the browser with the server, but you can tell what exactly the problem is by looking up that number. 404 means that page cannot be found. 500 means that the server has been misconfigured in some way and it's not able to respond to your request. So like I said, they're not really things you can fix, but if you are in contact with the website's owners, you can say, hey, I did this, clicked on this link, got this error, just wanted to let you know, so that they can fix it. Because quite often, I know I don't spend a whole lot of time clicking around in the Neckles site, and so sometimes things get broken and I don't notice right away. So it's very nice for people to let me know, that kind of thing. Another kind of issue that you might see is a network connection issue, and I've got a little picture here. I had to put 3 A's, an example, before I found a domain name that does not exist. So this is what happens when you mistype a domain name and there isn't one, using that. And like I said, it's difficult because there is an example with 2 A's. That is an actual company. Oh, yeah, I'll mention that in a second, Dan, I'm sorry. Your example.com here, that's what I was talking about a little bit earlier, the DNS address. That means that there is no computer assigned to that example with 3 A's. Like I said, sometimes it's going to be a spelling error. Sometimes it'll be just, some maybe glitch in the network. Sometimes it could be that the website's down. Hard to tell on those. But one of the things that, pretty sure this is Chrome. The Chrome cannot find it, site can't be reached message. One of the things I find handy is it does note that if you leave off one of the A's, there is a website at that address. And so it says, is that what you meant? So it'll kind of try and correct your spelling for you. And if not, it will figure out what you meant, which in this case is example, and give you the option to search for that example. So real quickly and go back. Dan pointed out, as I was talking about tabbing back and forth through these various options, if you tab through to this radio button, for example, you can tab to male, tab to female, tab to other, and then use your space bar to actually select other. So if you don't want to be male or female, you can do that. And so Dan pointed that out as a keyboard shortcut that I had forgotten. So, okay, well, honestly, that's it. Browsers are not crazy complicated. It's not going to be a lot of crazy work like you had last week. Hopefully you can kind of slow down a little bit on this week. One thing I would like to ask, though, there is a forum in the Moodle class on what is your favorite browser. If you have a browser that you like, whether it's Firefox, Chrome, Opera, Safari, any of the browsers that are out there, and you have a good reason, or just a reason, I guess, for why you use that, post that in the forums so that people who are maybe not as familiar with the various browsers out there can kind of take a look and see what people are using and why. If your only reason, the reason you use Firefox is because that's what happens to be on the computer in front of you, that's cool. But you might want to check out that forum and see if maybe there might be another browser that might be a better fit for you and your needs. So, was there anything you wanted, Dan, to cover?
Sure. I know there was a question last week about system time and secure web pages not showing. So I thought we'd just talk about secure pages just a little bit.
Sure.
So obviously, a normal web page starts with HTTP. So when we see a website that starts with HTTPS, that is a secure website. If your system time is not right, and you guys might remember this from your quiz question, then you're not going to see those pages pop up. I've seen this run into this in the libraries a lot, especially with older computers. That little CMOS battery, if the computer is several years old, 5, 6 years, then it might not have a charge anymore. And so that can affect the computer and keep it from staying accurate with its time. When it's not accurate with time, then when you try to go to the login page of your bank or Facebook, then it'll say that this page is not available. Just something to keep in mind that might be the reason why. Check your time down the bottom right if you see a weird issue like that. Another problem we've been having recently, it's been affecting more Windows 10 computers, and we use ESET, which is our antivirus software. You guys probably are fairly familiar with seeing the little green circle that often is red because it's not updated correctly. What we're seeing with that is on Windows 10 machines, it's not allowing the secure certificate to be communicated correctly with the computer. And so it's blocking sites like the Koha staff website or the catalog website and doing some really funky things with other login sites and banks. So what we're doing in those cases with Windows 10 is we're ditching ESET pretty much entirely and going with a built-in antivirus solution. The built-in antivirus solutions from Windows have gotten a lot better. So that's one of the reasons why we're starting to trust it a little bit more. It's not how it used to be, where I wouldn't trust the built-in security for Windows. I think if you're a cautious user, then something like that software might work. But anyways, that is causing some weird issues with the browser. And I'll tell you what, it was really hard trying to figure out that it was the antivirus causing certain web pages not to pop up. So there can be a really weird relations between security and a website you're trying to view.
This is true. So are there any questions? Anybody want me to expand on any topic I've hit today? Because
another thing, since we were talking about Firefox a lot, is there is the refresh option that a lot of people probably aren't aware of. From, I think, the About menu or the Tools menu, I'm not 100% sure without looking at it. if you've been using the same Firefox install for a long time, you might be noticing or not noticing that it's getting a lot slower over time. So definitely go ahead and hit the refresh on that. Keep in mind you're going to lose all of your plugins that you added. Most likely you're going to lose your form data. So anything that usually auto-populates when you go to a website, like your name or any passwords that you've tried to save. It's probably a good thing to note too is if you're troubleshooting somebody else's browser, tread carefully when you're messing with their bookmarks and saved passwords. People really should be backing those up somewhere else or have a way to find it if they lost it. That's unfortunately not usually the case. So if somebody, now that you're the new tech person around that has all the knowledge on browsers, just be really careful when you do say, oh, I'm going to uninstall this browser and reinstall it, because it'll really make both of your days a lot worse if you don't know what their bank password is or any of that stuff anymore. So try to do a backup. One thing I've been doing a lot lately is Firefox does allow you to sign in. I think we were mentioning this a little bit. That'll back up all of your bookmarks, anything you've saved. It makes it a lot easier to get that information ready for somebody.
Chrome does the same thing, and that's what I was talking about with the syncing. What it does is it saves the information on your local computer to the cloud, so that if you go to a different computer, say at a different library or at home, and log in to the browser with the same username and password, you get your saved passwords and your bookmarks and all of the stuff that you saved. Plus, if you do happen to make that mistake and wipe out somebody's information, all you have to do is reinstall the software and re-log in, and it will repopulate. Not necessarily everything, but it'll repopulate most of the important stuff.
It dawns on me that we should probably mention something like LastPass.
Yes, that's actually an excellent idea.
Software. What we've switched to quite a bit here in the last few years at Neckles is using LastPass, which is free, right?
It is free. There's an enterprise version that we use so that we can share among the 10 of us. But for the vast majority of uses, it is free. However, if you want to use it on your phone, which I do, it's like $11 or $12 each. So
anyways, this is password management software. There's usually a plug-in for the Chrome browser, for the Firefox browser, have it on the iPhone too, so that you really, the idea is you really only have to remember one password after this, and that's your LastPass password. So you can have super complex passwords and it'll create them, generate them for you, so you don't have to worry about it. They can be 14 characters long, combination of symbols, characters, and you don't ever actually have to commit it to memory or write it down anywhere, because it's just going to save it in LastPass. Now, you do have to remember your LastPass password, and that sometimes is a challenge for me on certain days if I'm logged out. But yeah, that is LastPass, Connie, that we're talking about. So if you're not using a password management program, you might look into it, or especially if somebody at your library has a lot of problems with remembering their passwords, you might suggest they put it on their computer. There are some kind of security risks, I suppose, when we're working in this type of environment where we share a lot of the same computers. You can log out of LastPass when you're done and then log back into it, but it's definitely a lifesaver. There's no way that I could go between my home computer where I have to do work on the weekends when there's a outage somewhere. It keeps me from having to drive across town, so that I have that information on my phone as well. So definitely recommend LastPass for that.
And LastPass is certainly not the only one out there. There's OnePass and several others, but one of the things that I really like about LastPass, and the reason I chose it for Neckles, was LastPass has been hacked twice in the last year, and nobody has gotten any information out of them. They've gotten into LastPass, but their security is so good that none of the information they got is identifiable for anybody. So at this point, it's not so much that I'm looking for somebody who can't be hacked, because that doesn't actually exist. What I'm looking for is somebody who, when they are hacked, because it will happen, their security is good enough to still keep my information safe. 2 hack attacks against LastPass that have actually gotten in. I've never had to change my LastPass password because it's never been compromised. So, you hear stuff like that, and honestly, nobody is unhackable. What you want is layers of security that make it so incredibly difficult for people to get your information that they go, forget this, I'm going on to the next guy because they're easier. And that's what I found with LastPass. So that's why I choose that. Did you see the question, Dan, about the from Helen?
Yes, I did. I was just going to move to that. I think what you are talking about, Helen, here is that perhaps you have bookmarks for each browser at every patron station. Like maybe you've got a link for Gmail and Hotmail and the library webpage. And so, yeah, I think that seems like a pretty good way of keeping those synced. So, yeah, if we reinstall a new computer, that you don't have to manually do that. You could export it as well. The only thing is I would have to double check is you are logging into those browsers with an email. It shouldn't be a problem. It shouldn't give them access to anything else, but there is the need to use that sync software. You're going to have to put some sort of email address and password in there. And anytime you start talking about that in a patron computer, I get a little questionable. So I might stick with the old-fashioned way of adding bookmarks, is do a little export for that in that particular instance, and then import them back into the next machine. It's pretty easy to go to the bookmarks tool, and then when you open it to the full options, there's an export, and then you can do the import. I would think that's probably the way. But with staff machines, I would definitely recommend the syncing. I think that's the way to go. It's just that I'm not sure what access they'll get to that email address, probably nothing, but I just tend not to have anything logged in at all.
With Chrome, I know you're logging in with your Gmail
Right.
account, and most of the time you have to, it doesn't just give you access to the email. You have to, after a certain amount of time, at least re-log on to the email. So you wouldn't actually have access to the email, but that's not guaranteed. So in a public situation like that,
With Chrome, I wouldn't do it ever.
yeah, no. Firefox is a little less.
Your email is not really tight. It's probably not a problem, but I don't think it's going to save you that much time and money. But definitely for staff, I would highly recommend it.
Okay. Any other questions
out there have any questions about when their browser doesn't work? I know we want to make sure we address troubleshooting as much as possible. I can't really think of anything besides the secure sites and when the site's just unavailable. And again, doing the refresh every once in a while with Firefox is handy. I can say that we know with Koha there tends to be issues when Firefox updates. That's why we're usually pretty careful about those updates. What I usually tell people is if you're going to update more than one computer that has a receipt printer, so if you work at a library that has 3 circ desks, maybe don't plan on updating all of them at the same time. That way, if there is something that ends up breaking receipt printers, you don't have to fix all 3. You can just fix the one, or say one's broken until we can fix it. Also, I would recommend if you work on the weekends, don't do that kind of upgrade during the weekend. The reason being is NECL's staff is not necessarily going to be available. So if you break a receipt printer Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, I will remote into your machine and fix it within a couple of minutes. But if it happens on the weekend, you're probably going to be without that function. I'm going to jump back to that Connie question.
Yeah, the CenturyLink website, that's, I don't know if this is exactly what you're talking about, but I just did a CenturyLink Kansas in my Chrome bar, and the first couple of things that come up is not actually CenturyLink. Specifically, it's CenturyLinkDeals.com, which is more selling you stuff. You have to go down to the third option before you see an actual CenturyLink.com domain. And that was kind of what I was talking about earlier, but I'm not sure if that's exactly what Connie
I
meant.
think what Connie is meaning, just because I have been down there and I know the internet issues she has, I think what she's saying is, how do you know if it's the browser that's working or broken, or if your internet's just down? We're going to get into some advanced networking stuff in a later module where I can talk about getting into the command line and doing some really basic network connectivity tests. That would probably be the answer for that question. Although you do have multiple browsers on pretty much any computer. You're going to have Firefox, you're going to have Internet Explorer. So if you try to test google.com and it won't come up in Firefox, and then you try to get an Internet Explorer, well, at least you now know it's a network problem and not a browser problem. Usually browser problems, you can kind of tell. That's, I guess, how do you tell?
Experience. A lot of this is experience. It's hard to explain.
If something works in one place and not in the other, then we know that the network's not having a problem. So.
And Kyle made a good
try
point
other
here.
Sites for sure.
Try
Kyle.
other sites, yeah.
Exactly. We run that to a lot of times too, where people are, we don't know if Koha is just slow today, or we don't know if the internet's slow today. And I think maybe that's probably what happens more than anything. So in that case, I run a speed test. We'll get into this later modules. Speedof.me is a really good speed test site because it doesn't ask for any extra Flash plugins. But if you're getting a good speed test, and it probably is Koha. It wouldn't be the first time. Back to that Helen question. She's been seeing more messages for the insecure websites, and I think, you know, I've seen that a little bit too. I'd have to make sure that it's not coming from your ESET issue. Like I said, we did have a problem with that, with the SSL certificates, so that might be an issue. But I did have a call last week where it was some state gov website. I think, I can't remember what it was for, maybe mental health, something like that, where their certificate had just expired like 2 days before. So it might be a coincidence as far as the latest version of Firefox. You can do a little scan to see the certificate. If in doubt, uninstall ESET on one of the computers and see if that's working then. One thing I have noticed is that if a site is given its SSL certificate to the machine and it failed, then disabling or getting rid of ESET doesn't normally just fix it. What I've found is that the browser wants to keep it, so you're probably gonna have to clear your cache too. And maybe that's something we should cover real fast.
Yeah, that just occurred to me. That's not something I had. Let me see.
Then we'll probably be about done.
Yeah. Let me pull up my Firefox here. Okay, so here is, you might recognize it. There's my Firefox. And this is not something I do all that often, so this will be fun. So the history is one place where you can go to see where you have been, and you can clear that there. Oops. But the cache on here, is it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. There's another history thing here where you can never remember, clear, or remove individual cookies. This is sort of the same thing as that history bar, but it gives you a little more.
There should be options for cache, form data, and that's where you want to tread lightly.
This is what we were looking for here.
The cache would be the main thing we want to clear. You might go ahead and deselect forms and search history, downloading history. If there's a staff user who really relies on what their browser tells them, just be careful about what you're clearing. You might clear more than you expected to. But we do ask people to clear their cache, especially after Koha upgrades. So that's a good idea to have a general idea of where you go to do this, especially if you're going to be the person that people call and you're not at work on a Sunday or something like that. It's really good to have a good idea in your mind how you would do that if you're the responsible person. Because I know it always happens to me, never fail. I'm out and about and I get a 1-800 express call and they want to know how to clear it, and it's nice just to have that information in your head. So if you know it's under privacy from the tools menu, you're doing pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I did not have it in my head. Clearly had to poke around a little bit, but that is a really powerful thing to do as well. And here I'm not connected right at the moment, but I'm using my Gmail account to sync here. It's been a while since I've logged in, so that's probably why it's not working. But that's where you would go to sync up your Firefox browser to the cloud, so that, and then just do the same thing on your home one or whichever one you want to do.
One thing on Kyle's point there is about a website being down. There are websites, if you just Google, is this down for me or everyone? I forget exactly. There's probably multiple sites. Usually, yeah, down for everyone.
Down for everyone or just me?
Yeah, that one, down for everyone. You can put in a URL here and it'll test from a different server. So if for some reason you know that you can't get to the staff Koha page and you haven't heard anything, you might check it from one of these pages. I don't know which one I usually use. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with Neckles right now, so I probably would.
There isn't, but you can see.
But that's true for lots of different internet connectivity issues. You could use that for Pokemon Go. You could use that for the Xbox Live servers. If you want to check to see if something is up from different areas, one of those sites there would be helpful. Not the one we chose, but.
Well, not this one either.
Yeah,
that's funny.
I don't know which one I've used recently, but probably not that one. But just keep that in mind, that there are ways for you to check to see if something is available from a different place, and that'll kind of confirm your issue. And always, you can call us and we'll let you know. But if you're trying to troubleshoot something on your own, that's a good way to do it, if you can get a site that works. I don't think I have anything else to add.
No, I think we did pretty good at 50 minutes of content. I was sitting there going, I'm not sure how much content this is going to be, but once I get talking.
Mm-hmm. So the assignments this week are?
There is a quiz on the browser and troubleshooting. I would like you to post in the forum about your favorite browser, but it is much fewer questions than last time. So than last week. So you should be able to, if you still want, you should be able to get this week's stuff done pretty quickly. If you have any questions, I don't think actually I have a general questions forum. isitup.org from Travis. That's even easier to remember. So thank you. I'll make sure that there's a questions forum before I go home today, if there's not one already, so that if you run across things that you have questions for, but at least one of the lessons goes through each and every one of those configuration options that I mentioned, that we saw there while we were looking at the clearing the cache, and you can go in and play with stuff, and generally not everything's undoable.
I did say, we're happy to get your emails. Definitely am. You might consider before you email whether or not it might be something just to post to the forum. You never know who might have the same question and is afraid to ask, or doesn't know it's a thing that might trouble other people. So definitely consider using the forum. Obviously love to hear from you in person too. If you'd rather phone call or send a direct email, that's fine too. But if you post it there, we're sure that everybody else is going to see it, and then we can award you a nice badge too.
That's right. And I'm looking, it looks like there's browser talk, which is what I had for the forum for what's your favorite browser, but I do not have a general questions forum. So I'm putting that in, then I'll open up the module, and then everybody will be ready to go. So general browser questions. All right. Okay, so any other questions before we leave for the day? All right, I think we're good. You can stop the recording.
I will do that. Thanks a lot, everybody.